me go back up here. Genesis or Bereshit in the modern day Hebrew, chapter 36, right? And we're going to start at verse 1. And it read, "Now these are the generations of Esau, or Esau, right? Who is Edom, right? The Edomites, the father or dad of the Edomites, right?" Verse 2. "And Esau took his wives of the what? The daughters of Canaan, okay? The Canaanites, all right? The white folks. Adah, the daughter of Elon, the Hittite. And Aholibamah, the daughter of Anah, the daughter of Zibeon, the Hivite." All right, so there you go. There's two women of the so-called white people, the Canaanites, that Esau took wives from, man. All right, so there's your two lineages of Esau that's white. All right, now, as I said before, you know, if you want to say that Esau is the so-called white man, right? If you want to say that, I give that to you. You know, if you want to say Esau is the so-called white man, yeah, but only on those grounds, you know, being that Esau married two, not one, but two Canaanite women, man, which was the so-called white woman. All right. So those two lineages that Kenaz and Ashkelon is from, those are the so-called white people. Esau himself wasn't born initially white, man. Not from two melaninated people, man. Not from two melaninated parents with very coarse hair, okay? Unfortunately, like most so-called brothers and sisters of this faith may believe, okay? You know, you can't say that Esau himself was initially born lily white or lily pale with very thin blonde yellow hair and blue eyes, and said he came from two melaninated parents, which was Isaac and Rebekah, and his own brother Jacob, which is Jacob, was dark melanated with coarse hair just like his parents, okay? But he was the only pale white born person with very thin blonde hair and blue eyes. Like, that don't make no sense, man. It really don't. It really don't. So just like I said, on these grounds here, okay, in the book of Genesis, the 36th chapter, when Esau married two women from the Canaanite nation, which was a Hivite and a Hittite, all right, which is the lineages that Kenaz and Ashkelon came from, all right, that's where you get Ashkenazi from, all right. You don't get the Ashkenazi, or they're called the so-called Ashkenazi, which is from Japhet's lineage, because Japhet wasn't white, for one, okay, that's following so-called Dorism, okay. You know, Dorism created that notion, all right, or that stigma that all black people are from the land of Africa, and from the so-called Middle East, you're going to get tan people or very light brown people, and then the descendants of Japhet, which is Japhet, they're all white people, okay, which is from Europe. Well, you can't say that because, for one, the so-called Moors ruled over the whole entire Europe, all right? Even the name Europe itself was named from a black woman, or from a black woman, which was Europa, all right? So you can't say that just because you're so-called European, you're white. Well, I beg to differ, because the so-called Caucasians, which is from the so-called Caucasus Mountains, which is in Georgia, Russia, is not a part of Europe. That's the reason why it's called Georgia, Russia. Okay, so you can't say the so-called white people are Europeans, but the so-called Moors ruled Europe before white people. And the white people, who we call Caucasians, which is from the Caucasus Mountains, that's in Georgia, Russia. right, which is in the so-called Hittite Canaanite kingdom, or empire, I should say, which is north of the land of Canaan, which is north of Tyre and Sidon, all right, which is 2 city states, by the way. Just like over here in this country, you have Washington, D.C., which is a city state. Okay, you have the city of London, the same thing. You have the city of Rome, the same thing. Okay, which is where the Vatican is. All right, so that should ring a bell. If you have all of these similar cases with so-called cities or city states that's operating on their own terms, their own rules, their own laws, okay, which was originated in the land of Canaan, all right, which was from Tyre and Sidon, how is that culture spreading all throughout the world, which is over here in the United States, which is up there in Europe, okay, and also in the Isles of the Gentiles, which is the land of the Gentiles, okay, which is of Japhet, all right. They conquered that land from Japhet and took it over, and that's when Greece became Rome, right? You got to know these differences, man, okay. The original Greeks was descendants of Japhet. They was dark people, melanated people, all right. And then when the so-called Romans, the ones that roam through the earth, the vagabonds, all right, they the ones that conquered the Greeks and took it over and called it Rome. That's what they called Greco-Romans, all right. They conquered the children of Kittim, okay. The children of Kittim is from Greece, right, which is of the lineage of Japhet, black people, okay. That's why you have a lot of black Greek letter fraternities and sororities, okay, because the original people of Japhet and the Greek people were black, right? Now, that's not to say that they were Shemites. Shemites, or Shem, is the chosen son. He's the chosen lineage of the Most High from Noah, okay? But Japhet was also a righteous son. That's when Ham ridiculed and he was bigoted towards his dad, all right, because he was drunken by his vineyard that he planted, right? It was who? Japhet and Shem that came in and put the cloth over their dad because they was humble and modest, right? Unlike Ham, right? Ham was cracking jokes about his dad, like, oh, look at dad, he's drunk, he's naked, oh, he's joking on his dad, man. But Shem and Japhet, which was the righteous sons, he said, no, this ain't right. We got to cover dad up, man. You know, he's in this private moment here. You know, we have to show him some respect as he's our dad, man. So they took a cover and covered him. All right. So that's the reason why Canaan was cursed, which was Ham's firstborn son. Okay. Just as similar to the story of David, you know, with Bathsheba, you know, because he took Bathsheba from his soldier, right? And he had his soldier killed. All right. I'm trying to get his name. I'm sorry, Salaki. I can't even really get his name now, but it will come back to me later. So that's sort of similar to that story. So being that, you know, King David, you know, lust filled his eyes, not to say that lust is a sin, but lust leads to sin. Okay. So he was lusting and desiring over, you know, his military man's wife and had him killed in battle so he can have his wife, which was Bathsheba. And then the Most High cursed King David for that because that was a sin. You're not supposed to, you're not supposed to covet. That's breaking the Most High's 10th commandment, right? Salakia. Let me put this charger back on. So that's breaking the Most High's 10th commandment. Hopefully that you guys can still hear me. Okay. He covered another man's wife. You're not supposed to do that. That's an abomination in the Most High's eyes. That's physical idolatry. Okay, so that's the reason why their first son was cursed and he died. Okay, but the second son that he had with Bathsheba, which was Solomon, he was blessed. You know, he was blessed over all men of the earth. He was made not only the wealthiest, but he was also made the smartest, the wisest man on the earth. All right, but you know, just to relate that to that story, that's how this happened with this right here, with Ham, what he did with his dad. Okay, so Canaan, which was his firstborn son, was cursed because of that, and he was given a mark, which was white skin. All right, so on these grounds here, just like I was saying, if you want to say, the seed of Esau is white, okay, I'm with you on that. But that's only because of these two seed lineages, which was from the Hivite and the Hittite, man. All right, but other than that, Esau wasn't initially born white, man. Okay? So in continuation, verse 3, and Beshemeth, Ishmael's daughter, the sister of Nebajoth, 4, and Adah bare to Esau Eliphaz, and Beshemeth bare Ruel. Okay? So right there, he took a daughter of Ishmael also. Okay? Verse 5. So also, I would like to add, that's your so-called Saudi Arabians. For the people who like to say, okay, well, Esau is the so-called Saudi Arabians too. He's the so-called Arab. All right? Well, right here, that proves it. So I'm not against that argument too. So if you want to say Esau or Esaudi, right, is the Saudi Arabians, I'm with you with that too. From the daughter of Ishmael, that's the lineage that he had as far as the so-called Ishmaelites, right? The original Ishmaelites were, the descendants of Ishmael, which was Abraham and Hagar's son, right? But you have today these so-called Saudi Arabians, which claim the faith of Ishmael and the Ishmaelites. They're not the original Ishmaelites, because the original Ishmaelites are from Ishmael, not from Esau and Ishmael's daughter. Okay, so if you want to say that the so-called Saudi Arabians or the Saudi Arabians is Esau on that ground, I'm with you on that. I can say that too, because of what Esau did. He married a daughter of Ishmael. All right, so there you have it. There you have the so-called two lineages of Esau that's white, which was from the Hivite and the Hittite, and Esau is the so-called Saudi Arabians from Ishmael's daughter. There you have it. All right, so I'm with you on that. Verse 5. And Alomabila bare Jerush and Jalam and Korah. These are the sons of who? Of Esau. Okay. Now, who was her? Let's go back to verse 2. Esau took his wives of the daughter of Canaan, and Adah, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and Aholibamah, the daughter of Anah, the daughter of what? Zibeon the Hivite. Okay, who are those two people? They're from the lineage of Canaan. Okay, as it says here, daughters of Canaan. All right, jump back down to verse 5. And Aholibamah bare Jerush and Jalam and Korah. These are the sons of Esau, which was born unto him in what? The land of Canaan. Verse 6. And Esau took his wives and his who? His sons, okay, which bear the seed, all right, and his daughters, and all the persons of his house, all right, and his cattle, and all his beasts, and all his substance, which he had got in the land of Canaan, and went into the country from the face of his brother Jacob, or Jacob, okay. Verse 7. For their riches were more than they might dwell together, and the land wherein they were strangers could not bear them because of their cattle. All right. So, basically, as the old saying goes, this land ain't big enough for the two of us, right? So Esau and Jacob had to split, okay, because of, Esau's family growing and Jacob's family growing, right? Of course, Esau, being an abomination to his dad Isaac by marrying all of these heathen women, okay, from the land of Canaan and Ishmael, all right, so they couldn't dwell together, all right. Jacob had his 12 sons, Esau had his children, so they couldn't dwell together in the same land of Canaan, right? Verse 7. Thus dwelt Esau in Mount Seir. Esau is Edom. Okay, and then right here, it goes further into the story to let you know who the descendants of Esau is, right? As it says here, and these are the generations of Esau, the father of the Edomites in Mount Seir. All right, and then of course you have, these are the names of Esau's sons: Eliphaz, the son of Adah, of the wife of Esau, okay, which was the Canaanite; Ruel, the son of Beshemeth, the wife of Esau, which was another Canaanite. And then you have right here, and the sons of Eliphaz were Tenan, Omar, Zepho, and Gatam, and who? Kanaz, okay, which was from the word Ashkenazi, all right. And then you have right here 11, and Timnah was concubine to Eliphaz, Esau's son, and she bare to Eliphaz who? Amalek, all right, which was from who? A Canaanite, all right. They're not from Japhet, okay, they're from the Canaanites, man, okay, white, pale Canaanites, cursed Canaanites at that. These were the sons of Adah, Esau's wife, okay, Adah from Canaan, all right, not from Japhet, all right. So there you have it. You have Amalek and you have Kenaz, okay, which was from the Canaanites and Esau, all right. And then down here, it goes into all of the sons and the descendants of Esau, which were also called dukes, okay, Duke Timnan, Duke Omar, Duke Zepho, Duke Kenaz, okay, Duke Korah, Duke Gatam, Duke Amalek, okay, all of these are dukes, all right. So the only dukes, all right, and then you also have, these are the sons of Seir, okay, Esau's land, the Horite, who inhabited the land, Latan and Shobal and Zibeon and Anah, all right, those are the Horites, okay, which are Canaanites, descendants of Esau and Canaan, all right. So there you have it, man. That's the reason why Esau dukes, the sons, are white, because they were all born of pale white Canaanites, man. And there's no denying that. There's no denying that. If you know that scripture right there, then you can't honestly believe and say that Esau himself was initially born white, of two melanated parents with coarse hair, dark skin, but he the only one that came out so-called lily white with blonde hair, thin hair, and blue eyes. Come on, man, that don't make no sense. That don't make no sense at all. You don't see any of that going on today, right? And then just like I said before, you can't say that they're the so-called albinos, because albinos don't have blue eyes. They don't have thin hair. Yes, some of them may have yellow hair, okay, but it's not thin, like how you see these so-called white people are today, right? They're not cursed with lice. That's a curse, man, right? When some of these white folks, it's like I said, it's not a racist thing, but it's a known thing in the world. Okay, that's a curse, that some of these white folks get lice in their hair. Okay, because their hair is not thick, it's not coarse, it's not strong like the so-called black man's hair. All right, so you can't say that Esau was initially born white, man, right? But there you have it. Those are your so-called dukes. And who are these dukes? They're sons of Esau from wives of Canaan, the Canaanites, man. All right. So you can't say Esau is the white man, but then again, the white people are from the Caucasus Mountains, which is north of the land of Canaan. By the way, it's north of Tyre and Sidon, and the Hittite Empire, which is the so-called Georgia-Russia Empire, right? The region of Russia, Georgia, or Moscow, either way you want to call it, or the land of the Khazarians, okay? That's all north of Mount Seir. Mount Seir is down there towards Yemen, okay? It's down towards South Saudi Arabia. So how can you say Esau is the white man initially, but he's from Mount Seir, which is south of Israel, south of Tyre, south of Sidon, right? But he's from the north, which is north of Israel, okay, which is up in the so-called Caucasus Mountains in Georgia, Russia, which is known as the Khazarian Hittite Empire region. That don't make no sense. You can't say that. That makes no sense. You can't say that Esau is the Caucasian from the Caucasus Mountains north of Israel, but his region is down in the Mount Seir. But he's white. Okay, he's the white man, but if you look at the temperature of the region of Mount Seir, which is towards Yemen, South Saudi Arabia, right, it's above 90 year round. It's above 90 year round. Only a melanated person can survive in that habitat, in that region. So how can you say Esau is the white man? That don't make no sense at all, right? You like to say that white man can't endure the sun. Okay, if the white man can't endure the sun, then how is Esau the white man, which is from a region that is over 90 degrees plus all year round? How Sway? Make that make sense. How Sway? Make that make sense. It don't make no sense for you to say that. So Esau initially can't be the white man. Okay? But just like I said, I stand on those grounds. You know, the Canaanites were cursed. They was given a mark. They was turned white. Okay? Esau married 2 wives of Canaan, and he married wives of Ishmael. Okay? The Ishmaelites were dark people. The Canaanites was white people. Okay? But the descendants of Esau that he had with Ishmael's daughters became white when they started mixing and mingling with the descendants of Esau and Canaan, which were white people. And that's how the so-called Saudi Arabians came white. Okay, this is the reason why they called them Arabs, all right? When you look up the definition of Arab, Arab just means mixed race. If you're more than 3 races, right, 3 ethnicities, 3 household groups, then you're deemed an Arab. So with that being said, you can't say that the so-called people over there, the so-called Saudi Arabians, are only known as Arabs, because you got to apply that to other people too, just as the so-called Siberians, the ones that migrated from East Asia, of course, through the so-called Russian or Asian peninsula, right, through the Bering Straits to Alaska, down the west coast of Canada and the United States, and dwelled and settled in the land of the United States, southwest United States and Mexico. Okay, those are Siberians, man, right? They're mixed with Ammon, they're mixed with Moab, they're mixed with Hamites, all right, which is the savages, the so-called Indians, okay, which is the heathens, by the way. Okay, you have to know all of these things. If you don't know all of these things, then you're going to get lost in the doctrine when they tell you, oh, these are so-called Native Americans, they're Israelites. No, they're not. They're Siberians. They migrated from East Asia across the Bering Straits down through Alaska and West Canada and the United States down into Mexico, man. So, and then if you look at them, their hair is stringy, right? The Israelites' hair is coarse. We're melaninated people. We're dark people with coarse, strong hair. How can you say the so-called Native Americans, which is really not Native Americans, you know, they're Siberians. How can you say these guys are Israelites that look just like us, but they have very thin, stringy hair, just like the Canaanites? They have white skin, just like the Canaanites. And I'm pretty sure they get lice in it too. So how can you say these people are Israelites, man? They don't look nothing like us. They don't even claim the land of Israel. They don't even claim being Israelites, right? The religious practices that they had over here relates nothing to the scriptures. Nothing, right? These guys over here wasn't keeping Passover. They wasn't keeping the new moon. They was keeping the full moon, right? They was worshiping dream catchers. They was doing rain dances. They was doing full moon dances. They was calling the Most High, or whatever God they worship, the big spirit in the sky. There's no Israelite that ever referred to the Most High as the big spirit in the sky, man. That's crazy. You can't say that these people are Israelites, man, right? And then if you ask them nowadays, they're going to tell you that no, we're not Negro. We're not African. We're not Negro, right? So if they was truly Israelites, and if they had that spirit to be Israelites, then they will recognize us as being the people. But they don't, because they're not Israelites. It's not in their heart. It's not in their spirit to say that we are the same people, right? Our ancestors are from West Africa, right? They're from the so-called Middle East. We're Israelites. The Most High is our God, the God of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They don't say that. They don't acknowledge that, because they're not Israelites, man. They're Siberian. They're Siberian heathens, man, right? Which is from the Moabites, the Ammonites, and the Hamites, man, right? That's your three haplogroups right there. Those are three ethnicities, right? So technically, they're Arabs too, according to the definition of Arab. But the powers that shouldn't be, they play these games and these deception games, right? They gaslight us. They gaslight society on a grand scale by saying that only the people that's in the so-called Middle East is Arabs, because that's just who they are. But if you look up the definition of Arab, it's mixed race of three ethnicities or more. So if you have the so-called Siberians, which is mixed with three different haplogroups, three different ethnicities, then technically they count as Arabs too. The so-called Mexicans today and the Native Americans are Arabs too, because they have three different haplogroups, three different ethnicities in their blood. Okay, especially today, the so-called Mexicans, they have so-called conquistadorians. Okay, they have the so-called Hamitic blood. Okay, because the original indigenous people over here in this land, they're not Israelites, even though they was melanated, they was dark people. But not all dark people are the same people, right? Just as the doctrine is in Israel today, not all dark people are the same people. Okay, and then they don't acknowledge ancient Israelite culture. They don't acknowledge the Bible. You don't see a bunch of so-called indigenous Native Americans walking around with a Bible, talking about this is the God we worship, this is our people. You know, the curses of Deuteronomy 28 stick to us. They don't. They was just a nation, a Hamitic nation, or a Siberian nation that was conquered by the so-called white people, man. The so-called Canaanites, descendants of Esau and Canaan, man. Right? That's all they were. They weren't no Israelites, man. Right? But I don't want to go too far from the scripture, but just to point that out there. Okay? I don't believe I forgot where I was. All right? Oh, so like I was saying, I've basically finished this chapter of Genesis here. So it lets you know of who all of the dukes are. It lets you know who Kenaz is from. It lets you know who Amalek is from. Okay? And then, of course, Ashkelon came from these lineages here. And from Ashkelon and Kenaz, that's where you get the Ashkenaz Jews. All right? Not Ashkenazi from Japhet. Okay? That's a son of Japhet. All right? So Ashkelon and Kenaz is where you get that name from. That's where you get the Ashkenazi or the Ashkenazi. Ashkenazi. All right, not Ashkenazi from Japhet. Ashkenazi from Esau and Canaan. All right,